The film begins with a Japanese woman named Yuki. At that time, she's in a building, looking like she's up to something. Then she leaves a strand of hair behind, and then moves to the window. On the news, there's a guy, Dias, the trade minister. He's talking about changing trade rules in America. But before he can finish, Yuki fires her gun, and sadly, Dias is no more. To make it look like someone else did it, Yuki leaves a bullet near the hair she dropped earlier. The next day, the scene shifts to the CIA office. There's this agent, John Franklin. He's got the job to figure out who shot Dias. Another agent, Clover, joins in to help him out. While looking for clues, they find the bullet and the hair Yuki left. They test the hair, and surprise, it belongs to an American soldier named Sergeant Beckett. They also find out that only a guy named Brandon can make such a long-distance shot. So John thinks Brandon's our guy and sends SWAT to his place to catch him. Soon after, Shin took Brandon to his house, where Brandon was just playing some games. Little did Brandon know, someone had spread rumors about him, and because of that, SWAT was about to bust in. At the same time, Yuki had been secretly watching Brandon and wanted to harm him. The plan was to make it look like Brandon had hurt himself after the bad rumors. But before Yuki could do anything, the SWAT team stormed in to take Brandon away. At that time, Brandon was super confused. He didn't know why this was happening and could only give up when he saw so many SWAT members. Yuki, seeing all this, quickly told her boss that their first plan didn't work. Her boss then told her to go with a backup plan. This new plan was for Yuki to go after Brandon once he was in jail. She'd get some help from some Russian guys who would stop the SWAT team from moving Brandon elsewhere. In that moment, Yuki had to make sure nobody knew about their plans, so she had to be sneaky and not leave any proof behind. They thought that if no one saw anything, the cops would just drop it. Later, Shin showed Brandon being questioned by John Franklin. John really thought Brandon was the bad guy because all signs pointed to him, but Brandon kept saying he was innocent. He said all he did was play games and didn't even know about any crime happening. During the questioning, a cop named Rose walked in. He wanted to chat with Brandon alone for a bit. Rose told Brandon he didn't think Brandon did the crime. He thought this because Brandon was a Marine and had a clean record. Rose said he'd help Brandon figure out who really did it. When they finished talking, Franklin told the SWAT guys to move Brandon to a super secure military place. Meanwhile, Shin gave us a peek at a place in the forest that looked like a workshop. But it was actually where the Russian mafia guys hang out. The mafia leader got a call from the same person who was talking to Yuki before. This person told the mafia leader to stop the cars taking Brandon to the military place. The mafia leader had to ask again because it was super noisy, like the person was in a helicopter. Elsewhere, the story showed Rose going to the CIA building. He met with Clover. There, Rose wanted to know why the CIA thought Brandon was the bad guy. He wasn't happy with what Clover said and asked to see the video of the crime again. After looking things over, Rose had a new thought. There was a big boss from a medicine company, Donald South, at the event. It was strange because the event was mainly for political people, not business folks. Clover was surprised by this. She hadn't thought of that angle before, so she decided to help Rose figure more stuff out. Now, back to Brandon. The cops were moving him in super secure cars. At the same time, the Russian mafia guys were getting ready with big trucks and lots of weapons to stop the cop cars. Yuki was also there, hiding on a tall hill with her long-range gun. She planned to shoot everyone when the time was right, even Brandon. But things went sideways. Someone shot the cop guarding Brandon, and he didn't waste any time. He unlocked his handcuffs, grabbed a gun, and started fighting the Russian mafia guys. He managed to avoid getting shot by Yuki, and even drove away in a cop car. Yuki was really mad about this. She was so angry, she shot the leader of the Russian mafia. The next day, Rose was in California, watching Donald South from far away. Donald was out having dinner with his girlfriend. At that time, Rose wondered if Donald really needed to be at that political meeting. Donald felt he had to be there because America sells a lot of medicine to other countries, and the meeting was about business stuff. Now, over to John Franklin. He got some bad news. The cars taking Brandon were ambushed by the Russian mafia. Some people even got shot in the head. John thought maybe Brandon's dad, Thomas Beckett, was behind this. Meanwhile, Brandon was on the run. He tried to take a car to blend in, but a local cop saw him and pulled a gun on him. Brandon, being a tough guy, wasn't scared. He quickly dealt with the two cops and ran off. On the other hand, Shin caught up with Rose, who quickly told Clover at the CIA about it. At that time, Rose wanted Clover to check out some weird stuff with medicine companies in Canada that Donald South had mentioned. After some digging, Clover found out about a recent problem caused by a guy named Josh Strayhorn. Hearing this, Rose went straight to Canada to find Josh. Then, when Rose got to the medicine company in Canada, he was stopped by a security guy named Phoenix. There, Rose asked about Josh, but Phoenix said Josh was sick and wasn't at work. Meanwhile, Brandon went to a safe place Thomas had, which was hidden in the mountains in Montana. At the same time, Clover told Rose that one of the Russian guys who had gone after Brandon was still alive and in hospital. Then, Rose quickly headed to the hospital to see what's up. When Rose got to the hospital, he found the injured Russian guy. He really wanted to get information from him. After some tough questioning, the Russian guy hinted that the person who gave him orders was mysterious and often used helicopters. That's why phone calls with him were noisy. Rose thought this clue was super helpful and left. Then we see Brandon meeting his dad up in the Montana mountains. His dad, Thomas, wanted to know why Brandon came all the way. There, Brandon told him he's in big trouble because people wrongly think he shot the Prime Minister. In an old cabin, Thomas told a story from the Cambodian War. Back then, they had a mission to catch a big enemy player, but one of his friends made a mistake and got caught. The enemy pointed a gun at his face. The friend gave Thomas a secret signal. At that time, Thomas had a tough choice. He could try to shoot the enemy, but if he missed, he'd hit his friend. Then, he took the shot. The enemy went down, but so did his friend. That choice still haunts Thomas today. Later, John and Rose went to Brandon's house to find more clues. After some time, they found a letter from Brandon's dad, inviting someone for a drink. This made John think Thomas might be involved, so he sent his team to Thomas's place in the Montana mountains. While at the house, Rose found an old photo album. It had pictures of Brandon with two buddies. Oddly, one of them looked a lot like Phoenix. Then he quickly sent that picture to Clover to check who this guy was. Turns out, he's Sergeant Ronald. The records showed that Ronald was once in big trouble for some bad stuff in Afghanistan. But the weird thing is, everyone thought Ronald died in an accident 5 years ago. Meanwhile, in an underground car park, Rose bumped into Josh Strayhorn, who was about to leave. At that time, Rose was super curious about Phoenix, so he pushed Josh to spill the beans about him. Under pressure, Josh finally talked. Turns out, Phoenix has plans to pocket a cool $8 million if the stock market drops, all because of a decision made by the Prime Minister to lift an American trade ban. Fast forward to 6 a.m. in the Montana mountains. It's usually peaceful there, but that morning, it felt kinda creepy. Some SWAT guys were waiting to catch Thomas and Brandon. Now Thomas had some security cameras set up, so he spotted the SWAT team getting closer. As part of their escape plan, Brandon sneaked through a hidden passage to a back road. Meanwhile, Thomas, who wasn't guilty of anything, came out of his house with his hands up. Out of nowhere, a shot rang out and CIA agents started dropping. Lucky for him, Thomas made it back into his house. He got his sniper rifle ready, and Brandon climbed a tower. The two of them tried to figure out where that enemy sniper was hiding. On the other hand, Yuki was in a tight spot. She was up against Brandon and Thomas in a sniper face-off. To make her escape, she shot a CIA guy in the arm. This move nearly got Thomas in big trouble, but Brandon was on his toes and quickly spotted where Yuki was trying to run. While Brandon was hot on her trail, he didn't know he was in Yuki's crosshairs. But Thomas, always looking out for his son, saw the danger. He shot Yuki's gun, breaking it. Soon after, Brandon caught up with Yuki, and the two had a tense showdown. Even though Brandon was losing, Thomas came in just in time, threatening Yuki with his own rifle. Meanwhile, Rose went to Phoenix's house. Finding it empty, he decided to go in. Once inside, he found something pretty shocking, that a fake passport with Brandon's name on it. Plus, a strange taxi receipt that seemed like a big clue. On the other hand, Brandon and Thomas told John Franklin that they had caught Yuki, the sniper lady who had been shooting at their crew. John agrees to take her to CIA headquarters and find out what she knows. Meanwhile, Rose found a clue about a taxi ticket. He asked a boat guy to take him to an island where Phoenix might be hiding. The boat guy mentioned there are 3 little spots on that island. Just then, a helicopter flew overhead. Remembering something the Russian gang had said, Rose asked the boat guy to take him to where the helicopter usually stops. Back at the CIA, Brandon was off the hook because they found out who really shot the Prime Minister, but they still needed to catch Phoenix. At that time, Shin had a plan. They would pretend Yuki had caught Brandon and was giving him to Phoenix. And at night, Rose sneaked into Phoenix's hideout looking for clues. But oops, he wasn't careful enough. Phoenix, who'd been waiting, jumped him. Just as Phoenix was about to finish off Rose, something happened from the second floor. Suddenly, Donald steps in, telling Phoenix not to hurt Rose. It's clear now that Donald's the mastermind behind all the drama. He did that because he was worried. If the trade ban was lifted, he'd sell fewer drugs, making less money. Meanwhile, Thomas is getting ready to back up Brandon, who's set to meet Phoenix. But things take a twist when Phoenix suddenly shoots Yuki in the stomach. At that time, Thomas hesitates, old memories holding him back. But Brandon reminds him of his amazing sniper skills, nudging his confidence. Brandon then drops a password, one he shared with an old buddy. Hearing this, Thomas gears up for the shot. By the end of the chaos, Donald's caught and is the prime suspect for the Prime Minister's death. After all of this, Thomas gives Brandon a big hug, saying it was the toughest mission he'd ever been on. But with Brandon's encouragement, Thomas nailed it. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if you're going to be a mastermind criminal, maybe don't leave your fake passport and taxi receipts lying around for nosy detectives to find.